this movie about food made by a lot of people. And that's not a joke either. The movie makes sure to point that out to us. And this kid guy named Flint is showing off a thing that he made. And he's like, can you not tie your shoes? Well, then look at this thing. And then he sprays on the stuff onto his feet. And he's like, ta-da, shoes. And then one of the kids is like, how are you gonna get them off? And then Flint tries to run away from his feet, but it doesn't work. And then he uses tools to try to take them off, but it also doesn't work. And then his mom is all like, I like your shoes, have a coat. And we never see her again. And so Flint grows up trying to invent something useful, but everything he makes sucks. And then we find out that they live in a small town called Swallow Falls that the world didn't care about so much that they put the word Atlantic on top of it. And Swallow Falls fishes for sardines, and that's about it. And since this place decided it would be a good idea to not export like anything else, like not even any other kinds of fish or anything, the town went to shit. So then Flint is all like, I'm gonna make a thing that turns water into food. So he does, and his monkey Steve helps kinda, I guess. But it shorts out the house. And his dad Tim is all like, why don't you get a real job? And then we find out that Flint's mom died about 10 years ago. How did she die? I don't know. Movies never care to tell us about these things. And so Flint goes to work at his dad's bait and tackle shop. And then we see the mayor on TV and he's all like, I made a park about sardines and spent the whole town budget on it. This seems like a great idea. And then this guy named Brett, who used to be a famous baby and now he's a semi-famous baby, comes in and he's like, I'm gonna save the town with scissors. And then Tim is all like, you wanna go see the sardine thing? And Flint is like, nah. And then Tim is like, okay, bye. And then we cut to the mayor and we find out he's villain-ish, I think. Kinda, I don't know. And then he goes to unveil the park. And then we cut to Flint, who is taking his invention to the power grid, but is stopped by a cop named Earl, who's like, don't mess up the town with your inventions. And Flint is like, okay, but I'm gonna do it anyways. So then we cut to this girl named Sam Sparks and this other dude named Manny, who was sent out to report on the park. And then we cut back to Flint again, who is about to set up his invention. And then the news is rolling, and what? And then Flint plugs in the thingy. And then Earl is like, my chest hairs are tingling. Okay. So then the sardine park is revealed, and I gotta say, Disney, you gotta step up your game. I mean, these guys got a big-ass fish. And then Flint finishes setting up his thing, and it turns into a rocket and blasts into the park, messing everything up. And then it blasts into the sky. Bye-bye. Well, at least the fish is okay. No! And then everyone is mad at Flint, and his dad is disappointed. And then Flint goes and hangs out on a pier because he's sad. And then the news reporter Sam comes and kicks him in the eyes. And then she's like, wait a minute, you have shoes. And then Flint is like, I think I like her. And then Sam is like, wait, you hit me with a rocket. And Flint is like, you kicked me in the face. And then it rains burgers, and everyone is like, gasp. And this guy rips off his beard. And then Sam is like, you did this? And Flint is like, yeah. And then Flint is like, you're a weather girl. And Sam is like, oh shit, camera. And then she reports it to the world and is all like, Flint made this. And the town is like, what? And Sam is like, you gotta do more. And Flint is like, well, I don't know. And then she's like, please? And Flint is like, yes. And Tim is like, no. And Flint is like, but Dad. And then Tim is like, okay. And then they go into the potty, and then they're in his lab. And then Sam acts like she's stupid. And then Flint is like, the machine mutates water into food. And for some reason, this part of the movie is the part that has me all like, well, that's not very realistic. And not the part where food is falling out of the damn sky. 'Cause, you know, that's normal. And then Sam is like, can it make food? And Flint is like, yes. And she's like, well, what about food? And Flint is like, yes. And she's like, okay. Well, what about food? And then Flint is like, you like peanut butter? And Sam is like, I'm allergic. And Flint is like, oh yeah, me too. And then Sam is like, what's the machine called? And Flint is like, Flim, Flim, yeah, I'm just gonna call it food machine thing. And then Sam is like, show us how it works. And then Flint is like, look at this cat. And Sam is distracted for like hours while Flint builds a thing that allows him to communicate with the food machine thing. And then he tells the food machine thing to make breakfast. And Sam is like, so is it safe? And Flint is like, I have a meter that will tell me if the food overmutates. And Sam is like, well, what if that happens? And Flint is like, I don't know. And then the next day it rains pancakes, bacon, and eggs. And then the mayor is all like, you gotta make it rain 3 meals a day to make this place a tourist spot. So Flint makes more food and Sam reports on it. And then they rename the town to something dumb and it gets all modern but with food. And then the people are all like, I want this food thing and this food thing and this food thing. And then, Mayor, how's the weather? You been enjoying it? I think you have. And then the meter shows that the danger stuff is getting close to the yellow. And then Flint is like, Dad, I'm going to lab. And stuff between Flint and Tim are awkward. And then Flint returns to the lab and Earl is all like, can you do something special tomorrow? It's my son's birthday. But Flint is like, yeah, but you're mean to me. And then Earl is all like, please. And then Flint is like, nah. And then Earl is like, dang. And then Flint is like, well, okay. And then it snows ice cream and the kids are in heaven and I think they might be bye-bye. And then Flint sees Earl and his son getting along and gets jealous. And then Sam is like, this is amazing. How are you gonna top this? And Flint is like, with hot fudge? And then the kids are all like, you wanna be in a snowball fight? And Flint is like, I don't know how to snowball. And then Sam is like, just throw the snowballs. And Flint throws the snowballs and killed some kids. Oh, wait, never mind. And then Sam is like, hey, everybody, come to this place. And they translated her in Britain for some reason. And then we cut to Flint in his room, and he's all like, And then he does some stuff, and he asks Sam out on a date. Activity tomorrow. And she's like, well, okay. And then they go to a place, and there's a giant Jello, and they go inside and play with it. And then Sam says something smart, and then she's all like, the Jello. And then Flint is like, stop it. And then Sam is like, I used to be a nerd. I had glasses and a ponytail and like weather science, and kids called me Four Eyes, and I still need them glasses. And Flint is like, put your glasses on. And and then Flint puts a scrunchie on her and is all like, you're hot. And then they have whatever this is. And then Flint's phone rings and ruins the whatever. And then later on, Flint meets with his dad and they go to a roofless restaurant. So, how does that work? Are they just paying to eat the same food as everyone else on the outside of the restaurant? Or is there just like a small cloud over this one restaurant? And then Flint is like, the mayor said my invention saved the town! Are you proud of me? And then Tim is like, the steak is big. And then goes on to say, I think you should turn the food machine thingy off. And then Flint gets all mad and Tim gets all mad. And then Flint walks around and sees a big wee hot dog and is like, well, that's normal. And so he heads back to the lab and scans the hot dog and sees the danger meter on yellow. And then the mayor is all like, hi, and Flint is all like, how'd you get in my lab? And the mayor is like, I don't know. And then Flint is like, look at this. This is a hot dog, and this is also a hot dog. And also, the food is mutating and getting bigger. And then the mayor is like, yeah, bigger is better. And then Flint is like, my dad thinks I should turn it off. And the mayor is like, nah. And then we cut to the next day, and people from all over the world are coming to the town. And then we cut to Sam, who finds a Doppler radar thingy and turns it on and sees something. And then we cut to the start of the reopening of the town, and then Sam comes up to Flint, and she's all like, food is getting bigger, and Flint is like, yeah, I know, and Sam is like, we should do something about it, and Flint is like, I don't wanna. And then Flint cuts the ribbon to the town, but whoops! Looks like bigger wasn't better after all, cause, whoa, no! So then Flint makes his way to the lab, and Sam reports on the weather, but the news station is all like, lol, you're a nerd! So then we cut back to Flint, and he finds the mayor in his lab ordering a ton of things, and Flint tries to shut it down, but the mayor is like, no! And then Flint tries to hit the kill code, but everything goes boom. And then we cut back to the rest of the town, and Earl's son needs a doctor, and Manny is like, I'm a doctor, he's in a food coma. And then they break celery over his face, and everything's okay. Except everything's not okay, because it looks like more big bad food is coming. So then Manny cuts into the news and Sam is all like, big bad food is coming. And then it cuts to Tim going to Flint, and Flint is all sad and junk cause he fucked up. And then Tim is all like, fix it. I think? So Flint goes to his lab to get a kill code and makes a flying car all before the storm. Well, that was fast. And then it cuts back to the town and everything's going to shit. And Flint shows up and he's like, I'm sorry. I'm gonna go put in a kill code and save the day and stuff, and you guys get off the island. And everyone gets all mad, and Earl is like, it's our own fault, so shut up. So everyone goes except Flint, Sam, Manny, and Steve. And also Brett, who is like, I need to be a baby with a purpose. So then they fly to the thingy, which is covered in a meatball, and food starts attacking them to keep them away from getting to the food machine thingy. And then they lose the kill code. Good going. And then Flint calls his dad and is all like, I need you to email a file to my phone, but all Tim hears is... And then they go into the meatball thing, but get pushed the wrong way because Brett is all like, I want to go too! So then we cut back to Tim, who calls up Flint, and Flint tells him to move the kill code file to his email and hit send. And then we cut back to everyone else finishing making boats to get off the island. And then a dam that is holding all the food breaks and the citizens get away, but the food knocks over Flint's lab. And then we cut back to Flint and the others, and cooked chicken attacks them and eats Brett. And then it cuts back to the lab, which is covered in food, but Tim manages to send the file.
You got mail.
But then a chicken eats the phone, but then Brett becomes a chicken and gets the phone back. And then Flint and Sam go to put in the kill code, but the path down is covered with peanut brittle. And Sam is all like, we can't touch it, we're allergic. And Flint is like, I can't, I lied about being allergic. And Sam is like, why? And Flint is like, eh. And then we cut to the storm starting to cover the world and stuff. And then we cut back to Flint and the others, and Sam is lowering Flint down but slips and cuts herself on the peanut brittle. Then she has an allergy attack. And Flint is like, go get a shot and let go. And Sam is like, no, I like you. And Flint is like, oh, okay, same here, bye. So Flint cuts the rope thingy and falls to the bottom and finds the food machine thingy. And then we cut back to Manny and Steve, and Gummy Bear start attacking the car, and Steve goes ape shit. You get it? Cause he's a monkey? Yeah. And then Sam and Brett get to the car. And then we cut back to Flint trying to sneak up to the food machine thing. And he almost gets caught, but then he does it. And then he ties up the food machine thingy and puts in the kill code, except it's not the kill code, but instead the cat video. And then the food machine thingy is like, get off me. And Flint is like, no. And then Flint sprays the thingy with his spray-on shoes and it goes boom. And then the world is saved. And Sam's like, Flint, no! And Tim is like, Flint, no! And everyone's sad, but then Flint is saved by some ratbirds, and then everyone says Flint.
Flint! Flint!
Flint.
Flint.
And then Tim tries to speak English, but doesn't. So Sam is like, there, now you can English. And then Flint and Sam do whatever the heck this is. The end.